Welcome to Soul Nutrition, where we discuss the various ways of nourishing our souls. I'm your host, author, speaker, and retreat leader, Reina Rose. I'm so excited to introduce to you today our very special guest, Jack Witt. He is the Program Development Director of Elevate Youth Solutions, and he's committed to empowering youth through effective solutions for elevating poor or missing life skills. Jack, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. So I was watching one of the YouTube videos for Elevate Youth Solutions, and I saw that teen suicide is up by 28%, resulting in 5 deaths a day. Can you tell me about your path and how you became involved with becoming a solution for this epidemic problem among our youth of this nation?
Yeah, I've been involved with foster care. I was the president of the board of directors for a large foster care counseling organization in Northern California. And after I transitioned out of pastoring, then they hired me to help them with special projects. So our board has been really conservative with our finances, and we had money and reserves, and they wanted to direct those dollars to help develop more innovative programs to help at-risk youth. So I came on board. The first project I did was in addressing youth homelessness. So we found out that there was, in our small community in Northern California, there was 300 kids who were enrolled in high school who were classified as homeless.
Oh, what classifies them? They're literally homeless, like living on the streets?
Some are couch surfing. A lot of them are couch surfing.
Wow.
Just between friends' houses. Some of them are living in the week-by-week hotels down in downtown area with unrelated adults, so CSEC kind of issues involved with some of those children.
And for some of us who don't know, could you explain what CSEC is?
So that's the sexually exploited teens. So those are the people they're taking advantage of, that they're in compromised situations, and they could be brought into relationships or into endangered situations where they're sexually exploited.
Wow.
Yeah. So we address that with partnering with high schools and helping to bring resources to bear on their, or to help them address the students who needed just food, clothing items. I don't know how many pairs of underwear that we bought, shoes, winter coats, things like that, all the way through to physical exams so that they can participate in sports. So anything that would help the students move from being disenfranchised because of their circumstance to being fully involved in high school. So that was a great program, but it also got me a little closer to this population, these at-risk kids.
Of course.
Then the other thing that transpired was that the state of California has a program where it's called Transitional Housing Program. So it's for foster care students who age out of the foster care system. So 18.
Oh, that's excellent.
They're out.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them, the statistics, you talked about the suicide statistics,
yes.
the statistics related to children who age out of foster care at 18 are abysmal. They, well over 50% of them end up on the street, homeless, they end up incarcerated, addicted to drugs, pregnant, alone, dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I think I was discussing with you weeks ago about the programs we run in Russia for the orphans.
Yes.
We were having the same problems, that they would age out of the orphanage and there was no continued care,
yeah.
and they hadn't had a parent at home to lead them in the right direction, to teach them life skills.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad thing is, many people in America don't have that either.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and so these kids that are rescued out of compromised situations live in foster care. When they age out, they go back to their family, and they're back in the same mess that they were rescued from.
Right.
So this program is great. From 18 to 21, then those children are removed from foster care homes, but they're given provisions so that we put them up in apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And so we rent apartments for them, houses where 2 or 3 of them are living together, and and out of those monies, and they have an allowance, so they're learning the budget, things like that. So they're still under the care of a social worker.
Yes.
For those 3 years. And so that social worker is helping them get their first job. If they haven't finished high school, help them get their GED. if they want to go to college, help them get enrolled in college. So it's a great program.
Right, and they're all in that. If there's a couple of them in the apartment, they're all in this program, so they're supporting each other and lifting each other up.
Yeah,
because they're all getting this support together.
Exactly.
Oh, well, that's great.
Yeah, so it's a terrific program. But the problem that we found with it is that these kids are still missing those core life skills.
Mm-hmm.
So we go out and social worker works really hard to find or to get them their first job. And they show up for work on day 2, and the supervisor corrects them on something that they did, and they go off in a stream of expletives and walk off the job.
Right.
Because they don't know how to communicate. Their conflict resolution skills are very poor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much of that those missing elements of their lives, those social emotional skills that are sabotaging the opportunities that they're given. So we started looking at that from an agency standpoint of like, how do we fix this? How do we address this? So we talked to educators, we talked to clinicians, and it's like, okay, how do we do this? And schools are facing this problem just in behavioral issues in classrooms, in classroom management. It's crazy what educators are having to do. They're spending an inordinate amount of time just dealing with behavioral issues in the classroom and not being able to teach.
Right.
So we took a look at that and we said, okay, well, how do we address that? How do we help these students grow in these life skills? Foster care is a unique environment because as much as the foster parents are trying to do, they're really charged with just making sure that child is safe and cared for and has food and a place to rest. So some of those parenting actions of helping children to really grow in socialization.
Right.
How do you get along with others? How do you manage your own emotions?
And that's got to be tough, bringing in a foster child that you haven't raised from infancy, where you would learn how to communicate with them, how they're developing. And so when you're just trying to connect into this teen that's very closed off and you're the foster parent of all things, it's got to be very tough. So the challenge of also teaching the life skills, and also even if they tried, sometimes they might not break through to that child.
Exactly.
So having an outside organization that's fun, that's engaging, would actually help develop those skills in a way that they're willing to incorporate into their lives.
Exactly, yeah. And what we found is that most approaches to addressing this problem are these missing life skills, core life skills. Most of the approaches are educational. So you're getting kids in a small group, and it's like, okay, today we're going to talk about self-talk. That internal recording that goes over and over in your head, talks you into or out of things, right? So it's a great subject. Teenagers need to understand that voice and to be able to discern how to pay attention to it or ignore it, right? And so, but as soon as you get a group of teenagers together and you say, today we're going to talk about, you've disengaged 98% of them.
Of course.
Right? So, so we started looking at it, doing research and trying to figure out what's the best way to get high engagement. So we started looking at coaching methodology, part of my master's program, Master's in Strategic Leadership, and there was a whole core of that program that focused on coaching. And I didn't think much of it.
Really?
Yeah, initially.
It's so funny because that's what I do. So
I
I do this for adults. So I think this is incredible. I've seen the results that are in adults, and they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s before they're starting this.
It's true.
And they have massive results. Like, man, if people would have had this at 12, 13, 14, 17, and being able to implement this coaching their entire lives.
Yes.
I mean, what a firm foundation to build on.
Yeah. Well, I'm a believer now. So
good.
Yeah, it was. I coming from a church background, so I was a pastor for 25 years.
A group coach, come on.
Yeah, but you get into this role where you're the advisor, and people come to you all the time and asking well, what would you recommend that I do with this? And I was happy to give advice out.
Oh, yeah.
And you become a specialist at giving advice to people instead of really listening to them or asking them questions.
To get them to own their advice.
Exactly.
I grew up with a pastor who I would come to him asking for advice, and I would leave with 5 other questions.
Right.
Not answering my original question, but really leading me down a path to find the answer I was truly seeking, which usually wasn't the question I came asking.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I wish I would have learned this years and years ago in my pastoral leadership, because I gave a lot of advice that no one paid attention to.
Because it wasn't their own.
No.
Right?
They're sitting there nodding at me and saying, "Oh, this is great. You've helped us so much." And
And
then
if they would have
implemented
implemented it, they probably would have been helped so much.
Yeah, but like you said,
But
it's
they
not
didn't
theirs.
own it, right?
Not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Incredible insights.
So we said, and so I started looking at coaching methodology as just a form of engagement. So these kids are, by our culture, very narcissistic. They're very self-focused, and so we're going to make it about them. Coaching makes it about you.
Yes.
What do you want to work on? What's on your mind? They're so used to having adults tell them what they should think.
Yes.
And tell them what they should do. And what we found is, even as we started this program, our pilots in this program, we found these kids, these teenagers, not being able to answer questions because they're not used to being asked questions.
Yes, I have seen that in even little kids, where I think I gave a kid a Polly Pocket one year. And she goes, "I don't know what to do with it." I'm like, "Well, you just take her and go, hey, I'm Polly," and you make up a little story. But she had been so, played with adults, told by adults what to do, that there was no imagination there anymore, no creative impulse, because she obeyed. She did what she was told. She played the game that she had instructions for. But to just have an imagination and creativity was completely lacking. And I was grateful to get a lot of time with that particular child and come up with imaginative games and prompt those things. But the thing about the self-talk, the prompting, the life skills, a lot of people grew up with parents who were giving themselves negative self-talk.
Absolutely.
So that's what they hear is, "I'm fat, I'm worthless, you idiot, why'd you do this?"
Right.
And so why would they have any different story in their own mind unless there's someone there to teach them a different way?
Yeah, and that's what we found in our research, was that this is a generational thing. As family systems and structures have broken down in American culture, then we've lost that primary transmission system. How do you communicate that? So those children and those teenagers are being raised in home environments, like you said, where the parent is not managing self-talk. They're not regulating their own emotions.
Right.
They're not dealing well with conflict situations. They're living in a false image of what other people expect of them rather than truly their own identity.
Oh, I've absolutely seen this. It's an epidemic.
It is.
It's not even just a couple of households. It's a true epidemic. And kids are not learning how to think for themselves. Even just how to play and have some downtime and be creative and wonder. That has been completely lost. I mean, I remember laying on the slides upside down, looking at the clouds with my brother, coming up with what shapes of dragons and different things, because we had time to just wonder, and we were so creative, and both of us were musicians and came up with songs and plays, and I've developed into a business owner, and I think about the solutions that just having the time to wonder and the quiet space for that creativity to rise up. If no one's given you the space because they've overscheduled your day into you're here at this time and there at this time, and you never have an opportunity to just play, be creative, develop a new kind of self-talk.
Right.
How would you get there? It's incredible what you're doing.
Yeah, it's been very rewarding because we've seen it on both ends of the spectrum. You have the kids who come from really broken families where there's substance abuse, where there's neglect and those kinds of situations. But then we also, our pilots were done for this program were done in San Diego. So you have upper middle income people, but these families are really driven, and they're, like you said, it's just everything's scheduled out, and it's like they're some of them are living vicariously through their children, and driving them achievement, and these kids are just lost in this.
Yes.
We had one girl. We have in our program, we have all the students have journals, and in the journals there's 3 occurrences of what we call base camp. So that's a self-assessment. Mm-hmm. We're looking for their satisfaction level in 4 areas: their connections, their relationships, their fitness, their intellect, and their emotions. Mm-hmm. So they score themselves, they locate themselves. It's kind of we use this mountain climbing metaphor.
Yes, I'd like to get into that later. I can imagine that those San Diego kids are probably pretty good in the 2 middle ones.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
But the other 2, I would imagine, might be lacking.
Yeah. Across the board, we pay attention to those outside, the first and the fourth. So that's the relationships and the emotions, social and emotions. So that's what we're.
And if you build your life on, what were the middle 2?
Intellect and fitness.
Intellect and fitness. People time and time again have built their life on this because those are pretty tangible,
right? And
seeing their world crumble because though they're tangible, they don't hold up without the other 2 bracketing them together.
Yeah, so this girl, this Alyssa, she's in a group, and she fills out her assessment, or her base camp assessment, and it's all 9s and 10s. It's like this, looks like she's as happy as she can be about everything in her life.
A really great achiever.
Yeah. And so the coaches were like, okay, what are we going to do with this girl? Because then we bring them in the group process. Then one of the students comes in, and they're in the spots, kind of like you and I sitting here. So the coach would be directly coaching that student for 15, 20 minutes in a group process while the other students are watching. And so that first week, so she fills out her base camp, it's all 9s and 10s, and she gets into the spot, and coach starts asking her about, okay, so what's on your mind, or what do you want to work on? And within 5 minutes, she's dissolved into tears and confessing just the pressure that she's under from teachers, from parents.
That's great, actually. I mean, somewhere that she can open up about that.
Wonderful, yeah.
I've had clients, especially in groups, where they have been under that pressure, but again, it's been for 30 plus years, that almost can't come out of that perfection and, well, I already meditate, and I'm glad it's helping everybody else.
Right.
And you can't get them to identify with the parts that hurt, then they're never going to grow and heal. And that's the part about working with the youth, where they can break down that, because it's not so hardened over decades and decades of I'm perfect, and if I'm not perfect, I won't be accepted, I won't be loved. And so that's incredible that she was able to be in such a safe environment that she can break down and she can admit the pressure. So when you have kids open up about this kind of pressure, what are the steps? I know that you've got your climbing gear steps. Is that part of how you get them to identify the pressure and then build ways to help alleviate that pressure and move forward with their lives?
We let the students determine what they want to work on, whether it's a goal or it's a problem they want to work through. So coaching, you put the agenda in the hands of the coachee, right? So the person who's being coached. And so sometimes the kids will walk in with the most benign things and like, I just want to get my stepdad to let me play video games more often, or, all the way into some really deep things like we were just talking about with this young lady. So we let them determine that, but that's where we're really focused on the engagement. So we want them really paying attention to their own life and owning the pieces of their own life. So that young lady was coached into how do you deal with those pressures, and what is the best path for you to take to be able to live more free in the things that are important to you. Still honoring your relationship with your parents.
Right.
So helping her kind of unpack that and untangle that in a coaching relationship, she's going to run across things that are barriers to that, and so that's where we tie in that we refer to as our climbing gear.
Yes.
We have our goal is to help these students grow in social and emotional intelligence in their life skills. So we have 20 of these that we call anchor points.
Oh, 20.
20.
I only saw 5 or 6 on the webpage.
Yeah, there's
20.
five main categories.
Okay.
Yeah.
And within the categories are 4 or 5 different points.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so there's 20 of them, ranging all the way from personal identity and purpose to conflict resolution, self-talk, honoring others, owning up and forgiving, so all those basic life skills. What's going to keep them from being able to move from this level to this level? And what we use in the mountain climbing metaphor is when you come to a rock face where there's no place for you to grip, for your hands, then they'll use these cramming devices, these anchor points, and they'll put them in a crack in the rock.
Okay.
And then that'll allow them to move from this level to this level. So we tie into that with these anchor points.
Okay.
So what do you need to help you get from here to here?
Right. So what would be an example of kind of sticking one of those, what did you call it?
Anchor points.
Anchor points into a
crevice,
a cramming device. What would be an example of that in emotional life or in the lives of these students?
Yeah, well, what we're looking for is the gap. So one of our philosophical underpinnings for Elevate is that it's that old idiom that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Of course.
Okay, so everybody understands that. Everybody's experienced that. I, as a pastor, experienced that. You've coaching people, right?
Of course.
You've experienced that. You lead a person to a solution, but unless they activate that solution, you can't make them drink. But the flaw in that idiom is that we presume thirst.
Right.
Right?
Right.
We presume that the person is thirsty. And in coaching, what we're trying to do is get people to discover those gaps where they don't know how to get from here to here. So you're coaching a student, and the student says, I've talked to my mom 2 or 3 times, and I've asked her for permission to do this, and she just wanted to talk to me. And so it's like, okay, so what do you need to be able to get from here to here? Well, they need better communication skills. They need to understand what their mom wants, what she's interested in. So growing that empathetic kind of understanding, growing their capacity to be able to present their case in a way that is going to be heard by the other person. It's all communication.
Right.
So if you don't know how to do that, how do you get to that knowledge? So that's where we've backloaded those anchor points. Instead of presenting them as propositional ideas that we say, okay, today we're going to start talking about, your effective communication. Disengage.
Of course.
Right? So we put the coaching up front so that student's wrestling with those questions. They're wrestling with those steps of action when it comes to the end of the coaching. So we focus on the see-be-do model. So it's like, what do you see? Discovering more about the landscape of this situation in your life, and then being, who are you in the situation? Who do you need to be? And then ultimately, we want to get to the point of an action step. What are you going to do? In the next 3 to 5 days? What are you going to do?
I love it. Quickly, in the next 3 to 5 days, not 5 years from now.
Especially
for them, that's a lifetime.
For teenagers, it has to be immediate. It has to be something, because we want them to get those wins.
Yes.
Right. We want them to experience what it is to take a step of action and see the results.
Right.
Right.
These skills are, when you look into their futures with all kinds of communication, whether that's future jobs, future spouses, any communication, it's so imperative to have these kind of skills. I knew I grew up in the beauty pageant world, which seems like no benefit at the time, just sort of, you're pretty. But the interview skills were what really, any job that I interviewed for, still actually to this day, I got the job.
Wow.
Because I knew how to communicate. I knew how to communicate effectively, intelligently, and even jobs that I wasn't qualified for, I would get because I had this very strong skill in communicating effectively that I was able to learn quickly
Yeah.
that whatever this was, I've proven in the past I can tackle these kind of challenges and present that in a confident way that gives the interviewer confidence in me.
Absolutely.
So these kind of skills, they translate throughout a lifetime.
Yeah.
And if they started early, these wins upon wins, with also realizing there will be setbacks and failures as just part of it, and instead of that becoming a crippling thing, it becoming something, all right, so I had a failure, that means this, and I know how to learn from it and move on. I mean, it just sets them up to win upon win and build this foundation in life that is so solid and able to move forward in a great way. But so
you were talking about those skills translating into other areas of life or for their future, and it's so true, because if they're missing those skills, it's going to follow them for the rest of their life. If they gain them early, then it's going to help them in so many areas. I have presented this to educators, to high school principals, assistant principals, different staff members on school campuses, and I've yet to have a meeting with an adult where I show them the 20 anchor points and they look at it and say, I need some of this.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is where I come in. Send them my way.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So we have relied so much on information.
Yes.
In saying, okay, well, information is going to solve problems, and information does help, but it's that thirst element that I was talking about earlier, right? It's like, are they thirsty? It's like, if you need to know how to bake an apple pie, what are you going to do? You're going to probably Google.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly what I've done in the past.
Exactly. So I was meeting with a therapist up in Northern California. He works for us, and he's been really instrumental in helping us with developing our program. So his name's Arden. Wonderful, godly man, and just an amazing guy. And he's done parenting classes forever. So part of what we've done in these Elevate groups is we've offered to schools, if they want a parenting component to it.
Oh, I love that. I read that on your website.
So there's been a couple schools that have picked up and contracted with us to do a parenting group at night to complement what we're doing with students on campus during the day. And so Arden and I sat down after we got our first contract, and it's like, okay, we got to design this now. So we sold it. So
right.
So we got to design it. And he's done parenting groups forever. And so he was like, well, we could talk about this. And so he's designing it around curriculum. And so I pull out my phone and I tap in parenting tips into a Google search. There you go. And I held it up to him. And the query parenting tips yielded 248 million results in less than a half second.
Wow.
I held it up to him and I said, do you think the information is a problem in parenting?
Right.
He says it's not. Because people can watch videos and read parenting blogs until their eyes bleed, right? There's no limitation on good parenting information out there.
Right.
So the problem is people accessing their solutions for parenting in their unique context. Coaching answers that.
Absolutely. And especially when their children are receiving a certain type of coaching, it's great because they can know what their child is learning and at the same time be able to help with that because they're learning the same skills.
Yeah. It's
just kind of like when your kid comes to you with advanced trigonometry and you're like, oh shoot, I forgot trigonometry or I never learned it in the first place.
Absolutely.
And so you're teaching them these skills as well because some of them may have never received them themselves.
Right.
Or have fallen back on they had once been pretty good about the self-talk and once or just being able to support their child in a better way because they know exactly that's so incredible. And when you can support the whole family, that really helps even more facilitate that communication that you're talking about between the students and the parents.
Yeah, I wanted to do the parenting groups on every campus.
Yes.
Because I don't want these parents sabotaging what we're doing with the kids.
Exactly.
We want them reinforcing that. So become curious, become inquisitive, stop giving so much direction and telling them what they should think, ask them what they think.
Right.
So we're on these parenting groups. That's all we're doing is we're doing exactly the same model that we're doing in the classroom with the students, where it's an observed coaching process. We are bringing the parents into that, and they're loving it.
That's great.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
That's incredible that you've got those thirsty parents and kids. Because sometimes I've found with my coaching clients, they'll come in that girl with all 9s and 10s, I'm so perfect, and you almost have to get into the pain points, which I used to not want to do as an early coach, because I'm like, no, I want to help people feel better. But if they're already lying to themselves about how good they feel, me telling them, yes, continue to tell yourself you feel better is not going to help. I actually have to dive into that pain and get them thirsty with the pain points, which was so hard for me to learn in the beginning, that you really, until you identify and dig into that pain, you're never going to be happier, and you're never going to climb that mountain to greater fulfillment.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us about some of maybe the major, climbing gear?
Okay. So those anchor points, as I said, we backload those. So we use the coaching as the mechanism to engage students, to build empathy because they're being observed by their peers.
Yes, which I've read on empathy that's lacking in, especially I think it was Generation X or Y and below. The empathy is just being tossed out the window. Yeah,
we're so self-focused.
Yes.
That we don't connect with other people emotionally. We don't read their emotional content very well because those empathetic skills are really lacking.
And when we don't learn it at home, because our parents never learned it at home, it's just, like you said, generationally going to keep being a problem.
It will, yeah. So we use coaching for engagement. After the student is directly coached in the spot, then we allow their peers to speak in the process. So it creates that more Socratic circle. So that and coaches guide that process. That they're not leading, they're guiding at this point. So that guidance is in helping students. They'll make a statement and say, well, how could you ask that as a question? So it's helping the students to grow in this ability as well. So but they're relating to and connecting to their peer who's sitting there in the spot that day. The pain that they're experiencing, the frustration because they don't know how to get from here to here. So all the while that this coaching and Socratic process is going on, we have 2 coaches in every group.
Great.
So we want one to be the primary coach so that they can put their attention focus on the student who's in the spot that week. The second coach is for fruit management, which is necessary, especially with junior hires. I didn't think this program would work with junior hires, but they're eating it up.
Oh, I was a junior high youth leader for about 8 years.
Oh, were you? Yeah.
And honestly, it's my favorite age because I actually feel junior high is where you pivot, where you will go for the foreseeable future, really. You begin to develop, are you identifying as the bad kid who gets in trouble? And then you can pick that in high school too.
That's true.
And then that just keeps following you forever. And so I love that because the kids are not at the point where they're in high school and I know everything quite yet.
Right, yeah.
And not being their teacher or their parents, I was a youth leader. I was in a somewhat peer position. I was younger then. And, they were able to listen and get them to start journaling, get them to start self-reflecting, which, I've talked to them later in life, and it's been a skill that's followed them all along because they were able to self-reflect through things in a way that helped them not cuss out their boss and walk away, that helped them to, have a better conversation with their significant other. Right. And so this is incredible. I love that.
Yeah. So that second coach is managing the group, just behavioral issues. But then they're also listening to this conversation and looking for the sticking points. So where that student came across something, because we've had students that are like, this one kid needed to talk to his coach because he was in jeopardy of being kicked off the team because of conduct and grades. So he needed to have this conversation with his coach. And so his athletic coach. So in the group, he's exploring that, and in fact, I think it was a follow-up. So he had set his action step to go talk to the coach that week.
Okay.
Next week he comes back and the coaches do a check-in with the students who were in the spot the previous week. And they say, okay, how did that go? You said you were going to do this. What happened? And so there's a sense of accountability in the group, but it also is a coaching moment, because then that student talked about how that he went to the coach's door, actually walked right up to the door of the coach's office like 3 or 4 times during that week.
Wow.
And was going to go in, and every time he stood at that door, this message in his head was like, this is pointless. He's just going to kick you off the team anyway. Why are you wasting your time?
Oh.
Right?
And how many adults have that self-talk?
All the time.
Oh, my boss is just going to say this anyway, and there's not even a point to bring that up.
Yeah. So you believe that message and don't take action on things that could change. So then he comes back to the group the next week and is talking about that. So the coach is like, so what happened? And as he describes it, the other coach is like paying attention. It's like, we're gonna use this point of pain. We're gonna use this real life situation where this 15-year-old teenager is wrestling with his own self-doubt and self-talk, and how then they'll facilitate a group discussion at the end. It's like, hey, remember when Ian was in the spot and he talked about the going to the door of the coach and talking himself out of that? Do any of you deal with that? So then they get to talk about how to use that anchor point. So what do you do with those messages? What do you do with that recording that goes on and on in your head over and over again that tells you that you're worthless, or that you're a failure, or that what you're going to try is pointless? What do you do with that message? How do you work that out?
Right.
So then they're gaining by this. Again, it's kind of an extension of that Socratic process. They're advising each other. They're advising themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I found that groups, we're all going through the same things.
Yeah.
And so sometimes even when someone else is opening up about a problem they're going through, I go, I haven't even admitted to myself I'm going through that same problem.
Exactly.
It actually helps me admit to myself, yeah, I'm dealing with that too.
Yeah.
And without the group, I would have just been completely oblivious to dealing with that problem, but it doesn't mean I'm not dealing with it.
Right. Yeah.
So I love that group dynamic that actually helps students or anybody identify problems that they didn't even know that they were dealing with.
Right. Yeah, we had a girl in one of the groups there was a male in the spot that week, and he talked about his relationship. His older brother was really bullying him, and so he needed to have a conversation with him, and he wanted to have that hard talk. So that was his action step that week.
Yeah.
It was through the coaching, the direct coaching. He was going to go and have a heart-to-heart conversation with his brother about his behavior toward him. And so, all the while that he's talking this through, this female is in the observing the peer group, and she's thinking about her messed up relationship with her older sister. She goes that week and has this heart-to-heart with her older sister, and comes back reporting this, like, this is, so when it came up, because the guy, the young man, was asked about his action step, and he didn't do it. He chickened out.
Oh, no.
And so she said, I did. I was sitting there, as you were talking about your relationship with your older brother, I'm thinking about my older sister. And she took action on it. Like you said, it's like she kind of...
I'm dealing with that same thing.
Yeah. It opened up that territory in her own life and gave her an action step that she... it wasn't even hers, as far as the coaching of the week.
It's unfortunately so common these days that people relate to each other by picking on each other, by putting each other down, and truly bullying each other is it's a very archaic way that people have learned to identify with each other and build camaraderie in a way that's true. It is just really devastating to your self-image, to your, who you believe that you are. Because even if it's a joke, it hits home every time someone, says this about you or that about you. And so to help kids from a young age identify that while that might be normal behavior, it's not in any way going to build you up. It's not in any way going to benefit you or the other person.
Mhm.
And there's another way
Mhm.
that we can approach communication with each other. And when I teach again adults about this, it feels awkward at first to compliment your friends, your family, to lift them up and tell them how much you appreciate them or how proud of them you are. It feels cheesy and weird because it's so abnormal.
Yeah, it is.
But if we can teach our youth to do this and make it a normal thing, I mean, our world will change.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what we're after. It's just if we can create those positive peer environments, and we had this experience with a middle school group where one of the young men, he's probably 13 years old, something like that, and he's on the autism spectrum. And so he was in the spot one day, or one of the weeks, and just talked about his experience with being made fun of. And some of the kids who were in that group were kids that had made fun of him.
Oh no. Well, good, but...
Yeah, but it was this great process of them understanding from his vantage point.
Yes.
So they're hearing his vantage point, what that feels like to him, what that looks like to him.
Right.
They're hearing this, and the coaches are telling me that by the end of that semester, as that group, because they meet for 12, 14 weeks, and by the end of that semester, those kids were defending that.
Yes. And what an incredible thing that this says about the program, that you created such a safe space that he was able to open up in front of those who were making fun of him and bullying him, because he was in such a safe environment that he could have the freedom to say how it hurt, how he felt, and those people were in the room. I mean, think about how many, if you're not in a very safe environment, it's very easy to chicken out and not say that because they're right there in the room. And so that's an incredible space that you've created through these programs, that you've really intentionally cultivated this kind of environment where kids can open up even in front of the ones that have hurt them. It's incredible. So I want you to tell me a little bit more. I know that there's kind of two components to this program. We've got the educational application, which we've been talking a lot about, and you've also got a church application to this program. Yeah.
So thanks for asking about that. I'm so focused on education because there's such need there.
So important.
But I was a pastor for 25 years, and so as I'm designing this curriculum, doing the research, doing our pilot group, it's like I started looking at this from the church standpoint. It's like, we really need this in the church.
Oh, that's where I learned some of this, is in the church. And I was watching in the video that 80% of youth leave their faith after high school. And so, being able to implement why this is important to continue. Tell us more about that.
Well, it really came out of, I feel like that I'm all of my life experience in terms of pastoring and what I've done educationally and private consulting businesses and things like that is all just kind of coalescing into this mission right now.
I love that.
It is just...
It's amazing how God takes all of the skills we thought we'd never use again.
Yeah, I love it.
And always creates this special niche that's just perfectly designed for everything we've learned, everything we've experienced, and takes our expertise. God is just so faithful that way.
Yes. Yeah, and that was my experience as we were pastoring, about probably 12, 13 years into the church that I pastored. We moved down to downtown area in our city, and we moved into an old performance arts theater, and we started reaching people. The attendance on Sunday morning was growing like crazy, but we were growing in all these marginalized people. So there were lots of drug dependents, very poor people, just hurting folks, disenfranchised population from our community were coming to church. They're hungry for the gospel. They're hungry for a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, this is great. But we went to all the conventional means that the church has done, which is the church takes primarily an educational approach to disciplement.
Mm-hmm.
And these people, because of their background and shame and illiteracy and trauma.
Oh, yes. This is what we see in our orphans all the time.
Yeah. They don't. We changed the name of the New Believers class, I think, about 7 times. We tried everything to get people to come. We tried to move it out of the church facilities and structures into coffee houses, make it accessible. And it just, there was so much missing in their lives. There's so much that you're trying to build these higher matters of faith and community and relationship with people. But when all of those core life skills and social structures are already so fragmented and broken, what are you building on?
Oh, absolutely. That's some of the things actually in our orphanage programs. And these kids have aged out, so they're the older. And the research I've done on trauma and the brain and how to rewire these things, because some of these kids, they're insulted and they've already punched the person in the face before their brain has actually even turned on. And so there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how the body actually remembers memories far before the brain. Really? And so their body will actually have this response to punch someone in the face, before their brain says this isn't a good idea. Remember all those life skills I learned? Right. And actually we work through doing theater, like improv with the kids in different scenarios that are common to them and they can share in a group. Right. That they can say, oh yeah, I had this, and we can work through this would be the way I should respond.
So it's more role play.
But role playing it and actually acting that out physically changes the memory.
That's amazing.
And so because they've already punched them in the face 20 times, you've got to have the right response 20, 30, 50 times to rewire that circuit.
Wow.
And because here's the thing, like you're saying, you get these groups and they're thirsty and they're hungry and they want change, but their body and their automatic responses are so conditioned that without literally rehearsing a new response dozens and dozens and dozens of times, they'll keep skipping out of the class. They'll keep not showing up. They'll keep going to the drugs. They'll keep doing the things that they hate doing. I mean, like Paul said, you hate going back to the sin, but it keeps happening.
Right, yeah.
And there's so much great neuroscience on how we can actually change our brains. And this is what you're doing with the kids early on, is you're creating the foundations of good furrows in their brains where they can build on this forever, and they don't have to, like what we're doing with the orphans, rewire this, because you're starting the wiring early on.
Yeah, we talked about it when I was pastoring, talked with my team all the time. It's like we feel like that we have to reparent before we can disciple.
Yes, that's exactly, and neuroscience will tell you that that's absolutely true.
That's necessary,
Right, that you can't just go into that same, it's almost like a canyon. You can't go into that same canyon because it's going to keep leading to the same river. You have to create a new canyon.
Yeah. And that's tough with even late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And we were seeing all of these people coming to the church, and it's like there was so much to overcome that of their past, these missing social skills and emotional self-regulation, all of that stuff, that it was just hard to move that needle. And so that's why my passion is really directed, because we have this window with these middle to late adolescent teens of how we can capitalize on that young experience and help them to be able to create those new places of thought and of reaction and of socialization, so that they're more fitted, more able for living successfully and happily life. So I looked at that was my church experience, and then when we developed this program, it was like, what do we do with youth ministries? Because we worked with a large church down in San Diego, and the youth pastor was really interested in our program. We used their church kids in their church for our pilots to develop the theory and see if this all worked, right?
Of course.
And so I sat down with him for lunch one day, and I said, so, because I knew they have a Friday night big blast. So 200-300 kids come to, it's a really large church. And on one campus, one of their campuses, 200-300 kids show up on a Friday night, and they have the loud music and the lights, and they have games where they're drinking things that other people spit into glasses, and they, just this.
Oh yes, I remember these games. Actually, I'm all disgusted, and then I'm like, when I saw the show Fear Factor, I said that had to be developed by a youth pastor because nobody else would think about those kind of disgusting things but a youth pastor.
Absolutely.
No one else has a mind like that.
Yeah, that's true.
And how they got adults to do that's a whole other story. Like the kids,
Right.
Oh yeah, it's gross.
But they do these games, they do the loud music and the lights and the smoke, and then at the very end the youth pastor comes up and gives a little 8-minute, 10-minute devotional chat. Mm-hmm. So that's their Friday night thing. That's their youth ministry. And so I sat at lunch with this guy, and I said, so what do you do that's discipling these kids? Mm-hmm. And he just, without hesitation, said nothing. Nothing. This is our church as an event-style church. This is how we do church. We get people together in rooms. And what you see in our youth ministry is just a replication of what we do with any other ministry in the church. And I thought, okay, well, that's an attractional kind of thing. That's great, but what are you doing to really help these kids grow? Right. And for me, it's not just about spiritual growth. I'm a hardcore believer, and I want people to know the Bible, and I want them to know how to pray, and I want them to so I want them to grow spiritually, but I also see that these missing skills, these core life skills, are going to keep them from being able to grow even in the spiritual things that they have, the ambitions that they have, or the desires that they have.
A lot of what you are teaching is the Proverbs wisdom, and then especially in the public schools, you're not calling it that. Right. And one of the things when I teach the orphans in Russia, I say, read Proverbs and learn English. Like this are two things in a business class. I'll say, read Proverbs, learn English all the time, because these kind of skills are the foundation you need for any kind of success. And it's incredible you're talking about in churches. There's no kind of continuing development of the students, of the people. And I found sometimes when people ask, "Oh, when did you become a Christian?" or "When did you get saved?" I say, I'm still becoming a Christian. I'm being saved every day.
Every single day.
Every moment. Right. It's not a one-time thing. It's not I had an emotional response at an event and then that's it. Yeah. Salvation is a continually lived out process. Yes. And we need discipleship. We need help with that, just as we need parenting in our natural life and counseling and all these kind of things. We need that in our spiritual life. And Christ set up that example through the disciples, and to go make disciples of all nations, not to go make converts of all nations.
Right. Or to fill buildings with people.
Right. People who are saved, and that's it.
Yeah.
That it's a continual process. Right. And so tell me more about how you get into youth ministries and you help them to make that through the life skills and through the continuing discipleship of essentially Proverbs wisdom.
Right. Yeah, we as I wrote the curriculum with education in mind, then I asked my CEO, who's also a believer, and I said, I want to develop this for a church, for a church application. So he says, absolutely. So I just took the extra time so we have student journals that are where the students, this is what I referred to earlier, in their base camp. So they're writing down, they're giving their self-assessment of their satisfaction levels. Mm-hmm. And so in Connections and in the church version, it's Connections Faith, their intellect, fitness, and emotions. So,
and what was it in the schools?
It's just connections. So we just do relationships. Okay. So we do relationships and faith in the same category. And then all of the anchor points then are tied into Scripture. And so,
incredible.
So it can be used in a church application. There's some people who say they've looked at the program. It's like, well, there's not a Bible in it. Well, it's like, okay, we have to teach people how to think.
Yes.
If we're going to help them to become believers who will last, right? And so yeah, it's not Bible study. It's not a a curriculum. So
right.
A lot of smaller churches don't have the budgets to do this great big youth event like I was describing about the church in San Diego. And so they'll buy a youth curriculum that's a small group Bible study, and that's great. I have nothing against Bible study, but I think this fits a niche of helping students to really grow in the skills that are. It's like when you look at online catalogs for colleges or universities. The course descriptions will say, okay, here's the course title, here's when it happens, here's a brief description of the course. And some of those courses will have prerequisites. So you have to have this body of knowledge in order to take this class.
Right.
So that makes sense. You're going to take Algebra 2, you need Algebra 1.
Of course.
And you
need to know how to add before you do any of that.
Perhaps, yes.
And some people, critical thinking wise, don't know how to add.
No. Yeah.
So you've got to teach those basics before you can get on to the more complex issues of life and of faith.
Yeah.
Just like Paul talks about, we have to be able to drink the milk before we can handle meat.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, when we're in churches and people aren't even getting milk, where do you go from there?
It's true.
It reminds me of, there's a little off topic, but I remember seeing something in the in Kentucky mountains or something like that, and kids were getting Mountain Dew because that's what their parents drank. They put it in the bottle, and their teeth were rotting out because they called it Mountain Dew mouth.
Right.
And
wow.
When all we're getting is fun activities and nothing but socialization with kids that might also consider themselves Christians, we're going to get Mountain Dew mouth of the soul. And that's what actually, all that you're doing is helping these kids learn to nourish their souls. So you're teaching them like the food groups of soul nourishment.
Yeah, in emotional intelligence, social and emotional intelligence is really the core of what we're after. It's like, how do we grow these students in how they interact with each other, but also that their own emotional intelligence, their ability to name what's going on in their life and manage that.
I've read articles about that. That's actually of key importance. If you can just name your emotion, it actually helps you to deal with that emotion simply by naming it.
It does, yeah. Yeah, my go-to description, I discovered this a couple of years ago, is I've been trying to grow in my social emotional intelligence, and so my go-to descriptor for what I feel was frustration. Somebody asks you, how are you doing? I'm frustrated. My wife asked me a question. So, you look frustrated. I am frustrated. But I found that I was using that as a blanket label for a lot of other things that were going on.
I used to use developing perseverance, like in James 1, 2, 3. If I was having a really bad time, I'm developing perseverance.
Yeah, and so.
But it was a blanket for a lot of things. It wasn't getting specific.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the app Happy Not Perfect?
No.
It's an incredible app. You can download it for free. It has several pages of different emotions that you can choose from. So it can be everything from I'm feeling magical to I'm feeling frustrated to I'm feeling upset, wobbly. And there's 3 pages of emotions you can scroll through and you choose one. It takes you through about a minute of breathing, through belly breathing to calm you down. And then it has you write a description of what you're going through. And so you write it all down, and then you bring your finger across the page and it burns it. And it says, biohack complete. And depending what you're going through, it has a different, matrix of things that it takes you through. And one might be, if a friend of yours was going through this situation, what advice would you give them? So it kind of brings you outside the situation, helps you. So it might even be a good app for the kids to engage in. And then it will have you do something just to still the mind, like a little maze that you have to bring a ball through, or draw your perfect day, and it's got little crayons that you can kind of color with. And then you end, and you could go into meditations, but it's that act of describing what your emotion is, what you feel, and then burning it away. And then, how would I advise a friend if they were going through this? honest, because I always had the great advice for my friends. I know the perfect thing for them to do. So being able to name emotions.
It's huge, because my label of frustration was masking things like sadness or fear, right?
Right.
And so frustration.
And that's hard to admit in our culture. I'm fearful right now. I'm afraid.
Right.
I mean, especially for a man. You know, if your wife has to, I feel really afraid right now.
Right.
That's not socially encouraged or accepted in our culture.
So,
but it's real.
It is. And it leads you to a better solution, because if you named it correctly, label it correctly, then you can manage that. So burn it away or whatever that is. I can manage that. If I know that I'm sad, then I know what's connected to that sadness. I know why I am, and then I can do something with that sadness, whether through prayer or meditation or talking with a friend or whatever. And I can deal with that emotion for what it is.
I love the journal for that reason. That was something that with my girls throughout my years in youth ministry, I would always buy them a prayer journal.
Right.
And that act of writing it out, putting a pen to paper, even more than speaking it, helps the brain process in a completely different way.
Yeah, and think about what a mislabeled emotion does. Often it's like, for me, frustration then sent me looking for a cause. There had to be somebody or some circumstance that was causing me to feel frustrated.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking now outwardly, rather than looking for, okay, if this is sadness, if this is grief, if this is some place of unhappiness in my soul, then I can tend that place.
Right.
If I've labeled it as something that looks for an outward source for this, you're making me feel this way. You're making me feel frustrated.
Right, and then you don't have control over your emotion now, because it's their fault.
It's their fault.
Right.
So I either have to remove myself from you, or I'm going to try to fix you.
Right. And I love, again, that you're teaching our youth not to be blaming, not to look for those outside causes of the problem, but to go inside and know their own solution.
Yeah.
So as far as our audience today, what is ways that they could get involved? How could they help? And where can they find you?
So we have a website that's under development. It seems like every website is under development. So it's elevateyouthsolutions.com. And so you go there, you can find out more about what we're doing in public schools and on church campuses.
Excellent.
And if you want to get involved, we don't have a donate button on there at this point. That's something we're going to add, because what we're finding is, for public schools, the biggest challenge for them is the funding element. So if you'd like to contribute toward a school in your community, and what we've found too, that in fact I'm meeting today with a pastor of a local church who they're going to fund an Elevate group on their local high school campus.
Oh, that's excellent.
So you might want to think about that as an option for your community. You can get in contact with us and see if you want to bring an Elevate group onto a middle school campus or high school campus in your community. Your church may want to partner in helping to fund that. If we can even get 50% of the funding for the schools, I've not had an administrator yet who has said, I don't need this on my campus. So the problem is with the funding for it.
So get involved in your community. If there's a way to help out, whether that's through funding or just letting your local school know about this program and something that they might be able to allocate funds for. So again, that's elevateyouthsolutions.com, and you will see Jack Witt on the pages there and find out more about his background. And if you're an adult needing some of this support, and you're not involved in one of these programs through parenting, you can check out my website at www.reina-rose.com. That's reina-rose.com. And I look forward to meeting you on there. Until next time, have a blessed week, and we look forward to seeing you again on Soul Nutrition.